Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that celebrates every single day the great people who are working so hard to make coastal Mississippi a better place to live, work, and play. Got a little bit of a frog in my throat this morning. Had to give a speech up in Jackson a couple of days ago and started to get a little bit hoarse. Woke up yesterday morning very hoarse. I feel fine. Just got a little laryngitis, but you're not so focused on your voice until you do a radio show. And then you wake up and you think, wow, that's, never had to think about that before. So I've been lucky over the last couple of years not having to deal with anything like laryngitis. But we're going to push through it, and we're going to have a great day today. Hey, I talk a lot about news and news gathering and the role that news plays in a local community. I do that all the time. And more recently, I had a conversation with my friend James O'Byrne, who worked with me over at NOLA Media Group. He had a long history in news, but was the vice president of innovation when I was president of NOLA Media Group. But he moved over to the countryside of France, and we check in from time to time. He's a smart guy. He's a smart news guy, Pulitzer-award-winning writer and editor. Just a really, really good dude. But we talk a lot about the changing face of the news media and the role that social media is playing in society and politics today, and on and on and on. But I have constantly said that one of the most important things that happens in a local community is what I would refer to as a reliably and accurately informed electorate. You really need to be focused on this. And I was fortunate to have a long career, 27 years at the Sun-Herald. I worked in a number of different roles. But in the last 7 years of my career at the Sun-Herald, I was the president and publisher of the newspaper and had the opportunity to work with an incredible team, Pulitzer Prize-winning team, I might add. And the work we did after Hurricane Katrina forever restored my confidence in the role that local news can play and should play, not just to inform, but to be a leader in the community. And certainly after Katrina, it was a great opportunity to see that. And it changed me. It changed me as a newsman. It changed me as a publisher, as a leader. It's one of the reasons, frankly, that after retirement, I wanted to come back and do Coast Vue, because I learned a lot about what it takes to make a community tick. I learned a lot about the importance of accurately informing people. And I'm deeply concerned about that on the local level, because digital media has changed things. In fact, when the iPhone became sort of part of society in 2007, that's not that long ago. That's after Katrina, I might add. It created for everyone the opportunity to become reporters. Some people are responsible with that capability, and some people are not. And the advanced artificial intelligence used by Facebook and their news feeds, unfortunately, makes it appear that everyone who is in your newsfeed, or most everyone in your newsfeed, agrees with you. And that's not always a good thing. We need to have good, sound debates in the community and so on. But I'm deeply, deeply interested in the conversation of the local news media. And I have been looking forward to this next conversation quite significantly, I might add. Let me bring Kate MaGandy Holzhauser into the conversation. She's assistant news director at WXXV, someone I worked with at the Sun-Herald for a number of years. And first, I'll just say good morning to you, Kate. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Ricky. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to see you. Kate and I worked together for a long time at the Sun-Herald, and she had a long history there. And we'll go back and kind of go through that journey. We'll talk a little bit about Hurricane Katrina. We'll talk about the important role that news plays in the local community. But Kate, let me just, before we get started, tell me about what you're doing these days at WXXV.
Okay, well, my job here at WXXV is very similar to when I was city editor at the Sun-Herald. I manage a team of reporters. We look for stories. We develop stories and leads. I help get guests for the show. And I also oversee the reporters and in a supervisory capacity, the reporters and producers for the news shows.
Well, that's interesting. It's the same thing. One of the things I've always been interested in is there a difference? How different is it to oversee a group of young news reporters compared to over here maybe newspaper or print journalists? Is there a difference in how you approach the job?
It is. It's probably a little more similar now with in the digital age, but being a television editor, you are always thinking about the visuals, and you're thinking about how somebody sounds on TV, how somebody looks on TV, how their voice is conveying the story. Whereas when I was in print journalism, it was all about how the words were conveying thoughts and feelings and actions. So in that respect, it's been a little bit of a transition because it's so much more of a visual medium than what I was in for 30 years.
Well, you see, you were in print for 30 years. I'll parallel those observations you just made with what I've experienced here doing Coast Vue, and this occurs to me all the time while I'm preparing for the shows, and that is my years of working with news teams, my years of leading editorial efforts, my years of reading and writing and splitting words and all the stuff that we did. It really prepared me for this. And I mean, the skill sets that I developed, I've taken for granted. But I bet you find yourself in your new world saying constantly, wow, I'm, just from in terms of just being a wordsmith or understanding how to frame a story and all of that goes behind that. I bet it just like maximally prepared you for what you're doing today.
Oh, definitely. There's no doubt that not having to, but being the kind of person that I am and you are, you sweat over a turn of phrase or even the right word to put here so that it doesn't convey the wrong meaning or the wrong inflection. And it's the very same thing with visual journalists, and even more so because people are hearing the words and they're hearing the inflections. So it really does set a good groundwork for what we're doing now.
And the other thing is, and as I said to you before we started the show, and I've said on this show many times, is that I had been retired for a while and didn't really plan on doing anything like this. Didn't plan on working again. Might have done a board or two from time to time along the way. But what I had forgotten is how much I had learned about what it takes for a community to tick. And what you learned, not just for your role was enough at the Sun Herald, your evolving roles at the Sun Herald were enough to teach you about that. And we're going to come back to Katrina in the next segment. But when you add that to Katrina, the deep, deep appreciation you have for what it takes to make a community like ours tick, we cannot overstate that, can we?
No, you really can't. It's, when people start asking about, what did you do in Katrina or where were you? And you start thinking back to, the day of and the day after and the days after and all of the people that were there to help us and, all of the things that we did without even thinking about it that led to this monumental task that we basically just took a bite out of every day. It's amazing.
Yeah. Let's take a step back for a second.
Okay.
You come from the MaGandy family. Your dad was a CB, and I've had the opportunity through high school sports and others to sort of intermingle with your family along the way. But it's a tight-knit group, isn't it?
It is. It's a very tight-knit group. Somebody was asking me about my husband and how we met and when we got married. And, we were talking about, I didn't bring boys or men around when I was first dating them. I had to be sure that I wanted to subject them to that inquisition that is the MaGandy family before I introduced them, because it's a lot. It is a lot. And especially if you're not from a big family, whether it's immediate or extended, it can be quite a bit to deal with.
Oh, that's so good, though. What a great family, though. What a terrific family. It's been, always always when I hear the name MaGandy, I think of all the tight knit group that you guys are. And I can only imagine what that Inquisition looked like. But your husband fit in quite well to it, didn't he?
He has. He gives as good as he gets, so he's fine. He grew up with two sisters, so he was fine.
Yeah, yeah. I got. So you went to Ole Miss. When did you decide, or at least know, that journalism was something you would focus your life on?
Believe it or not, I knew as young as 8th grade that I wanted to be a writer. And at first I thought I wanted to be a book writer. Louisa May Alcott was one of my heroes as a young girl. But my dad was very big sports athlete. He played fast pitch softball. We spent a lot of time at sports arenas and fields and what have you. And my love for sports grew there. And it turned shortly thereafter I decided I wanted to be a writer, that I wanted to be a reporter, and not just a reporter, but a sports reporter. I started reading a lot from Frank DeFord, who was a longtime Sports Illustrated writer, and read a lot of his books and said, yeah, this is something that I want to do. I want to not just write about the games, but the people who play the games. And that's where my love of it came.
So when you came to the Sun Herald, had a good long stint in the sports department, but when you became sports editor, I'm curious, and I don't know that I knew the answer to this. Were you the first? I tell you what, let's do this. I'm going to ask you an important question, but I want to wait till we get on the other side because we've got about 30 seconds left in this segment. But this is Kate MaGandy Holzhauser. We're going to refer to her as Kate MaGandy from now on because I have a hard time saying her last name. But people know her as Kate MaGandy, and that is for sure. We'll continue the conversation after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have Kate MaGandy with me. She's Assistant News Director at WXXV, an old friend, someone I worked with at the Sun Herald for a number of years. When we went to break, we were talking a little bit about her stints as sports editor. She was the first sports editor at Ole Miss, first sports editor in Natchez, and then the first sports editor in Biloxi at the Sun Herald, who was a woman. And there couldn't have been a lot of women involved in sports writing back in those days, Kate. Were there?
No, there weren't. As a matter of fact, when I wanted to be sports editor at the Daily Mississippian, and I had a friend who was a football player at Ole Miss. His name was Dwayne Nesmith. And I said to Dwayne, what do you think about me being a sports reporter? Because this was right when women were fighting to have the same access as men, even if it meant going into the locker room. And he said that he did not have a problem with me doing my job. And that meant a lot to me, and it really spurred me on. And I was actually one of the reasons, not the reason, but one of the reasons that the SEC changed their policy about women, about access to the locker room, was because I was covering Ole Miss football. And they had to either let everybody in or let no one in. And they, the SEC kind of had if there's a woman in the press box, then we'll do it this way. If there are no women in the press box that we have to accommodate, we'll do it this way. And, I take great pride in the fact that, I forced them to think about what they were doing.
Yeah. I remember as part of my development at the Sun Herald, I went over with Slim for a Saints game, Slim Smith, who we know so well. And it was during the debates that were going on about whether women should be in the locker room for professional sports. And the way that the Saints accommodated, eventually they changed the entire locker room and all of that. But the way it was before was that, just envision these lockers and then this very large opening that went directly into the shower. So there was really no breaking point between the lockers and where the showers were. And men would just come in there and take their stuff off, and some would put a towel on, some would, and they would go on into the shower and do their thing. And it was so interesting because what they did initially is they put these drapes over the lockers. And so the men could take their uniforms off and then put their towels on. And it was interesting about when they were letting the reporters come in. They let the reporters come in during this process. And some of the players were sort of okay with women and being in the locker room. Some of them were not okay with women and being in the locker room. So some used the drapes and some didn't use the drape. It was really an awkward moment, but I actually got to witness it myself.
I actually got to witness it myself, Ricky. I was in the Saints locker room because a player named James Williams, who was from Natchez, and I was in Natchez at the time, got his first start with the Saints as a starting linebacker. And so they sent me down to cover it, and I went into the locker room, and I'm standing there in front of James's closed drape waiting for him to open it, because that was the signal that he was available to the media, was that the drape was opened. If they didn't want to talk to the media, or if they just wanted some privacy while they got dressed, the drape was closed. It's a very awkward situation to be standing in a locker room full of men, some dressed, some not, and you're just standing there staring at a curtain waiting for the person that you want to talk to, and you didn't dare look around because you didn't want to be accused of ogling.
Yeah.
So, you just kind of stand there awkwardly and wait for your person to be ready.
Yeah, I remember I was uncomfortable. I remembered either one or two women. I can't remember exactly. It was, obviously there weren't many, but it was the players that were at different stages of acceptance. Some were really pushing against it, and they weren't saying anything about it. They just didn't change their actions from the way they did it before. And Ricky Williams was still linebacker at that time with the Saints, and there were many others at that time. But it was an awkward time. But you actually got to witness history, frankly, because things changed pretty dramatically, and there wasn't any reason why women reporters, sports reporters, shouldn't have the same access as men reporters. And it's a different world today, but back in those days, it was kind of a sluggish transition, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And, one of those women was probably Mary Foster, who was a longtime writer for the AP. And, that's her job was covering the Saints. So they had to figure something out quickly.
I remember Mary well, for a matter of fact. She was just a great reporter over all those years. Mm-hmm. Incredible. Yep. But along the way, just before we leave sports real quick, you look back on your time as a sports editor. Is there any one or two things that really stick out to you as during that tenure that just or something you're proud of, or something that you look back at with a big smile on your face?
I have to say, covering 2 Super Bowls was pretty freaking cool. Getting to see hometown guy Brett Favre win a Super Bowl in his backyard, that was pretty awesome. And I have to say that when I went to my first Super Bowl, we had 3 passes. So we had our Saints beat writer up in the press box. It was John Glennon, and then Steve Wiseman, and then our secondary and columnist Jim Mashik was up in the press box. And as the third press person, I was put in the auxiliary press box, which was basically they roped off a section of the Superdome and set up tables in the rows of chairs and set up TV monitors on poles so that we could see the replays. And that was their auxiliary press box. It was kind of interesting to see that Peter King was in the auxiliary press box with me and not up in the main press box.
Wow. That's so interesting. That's so interesting. I had the pleasure of being the president publisher of TimesPicayune and NOLA.com when New Orleans hosted the most recent Super Bowl that New Orleans hosted. And to get a chance to see all of the hoopla around it and all the incredible parties and all the festivities related to the Super Bowl. It was an incredible thing, man. It's a big deal. And I get when there's so much competition for a Super Bowl because of the economic impact, and the people come from all over the world. It truly is one major event, isn't it, Kate?
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. It really is. Everything that's going on for that entire week, and then to culminate in the game and the pregame show and the halftime show, and all of that. It's just amazing.
The Brett Starr story. Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
what a incredible. I mean, because the Sun Herald was right there. They followed it every step of the way.
Oh yeah.
You know, covering him in high school, and then at Southern Miss, and then when he got drafted, and being there with his family when that happened, and taking some of the iconic photographs that were taken there. What a incredible journey that was for him and for us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And Tim Isbell's got all of those iconic pictures from, from high school on through to his first Super Bowl and beyond. And I good for him for, being persistent and saying we got to cover this. He was really an advocate for that timeline, and it led us to be able to publish that book after he retired, just chronicling his life.
Unbelievable. Actually, I mentioned Tim's name the other day when I was talking about some of the amazing photographers that I was able to, photojournalists that I was able to work with at the Sun Herald. I have to get him on and talk about some of his books. Man, he is a detail-oriented photographer, isn't he?
Yes, he is. And he's so talented, so very talented. I just love his work. I have a couple of his books, and, just look forward to what his eye sees every time he comes up with something.
No doubt. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so along the way, you sort of made the transition so the way that newspapers were set up, you'd have the sports area, then you'd have features, and then you would have news, you'd have editorial. Some broke it up in different other ways, but those are sort of the major areas. And Kate worked in the sports arena for a good long time, but then she made a transition over to news. What was your first job when you came over to the news side of the organization?
Well, actually, I started news as a copy editor, and then went to sports. And then when I came back to news, I was an assistant city editor. And oddly enough, the first thing that happened was I don't think it was the Challenger, but weren't there two different missions that had explosions?
Yes. Yeah. Was it Discovery? No. I'm not even going to try to get Challenger.
It wasn't the Krista McCullough.
It was the second one. It was the other one. It was the second one.
And I was on the desk when that happened. I had been assistant city editor for a month and a half, 2 months when that happened. And we did a really good job of pulling that together and getting some localization on it from Stennis. And it really kind of threw me into the fire to see if I could handle that on a news basis. And I think my time in sports and having to deal with short deadlines after games really prepared me for doing that.
Yeah, Kyle, if you don't mind, grab the name of that shuttle, and he can remind us, because I kind of want to remember. It's every now and then it won't come back to me. Anyway, we got about 20 seconds left in this segment. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about the Hurricane Katrina experience and how significant that was for the two of us with Kate MaGandy. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. We have Kate MaGandy, who's assistant news director at WXXV-TV here on the Mississippi coast, and someone I worked with for a long time. Incidentally, Kyle, during the break, told us it was Columbia, the space shuttle Columbia, that burned on re-entry. And I mentioned to Kate, I remember I was coaching a soccer game and someone whispered in my ear during the game, and I thought, oh, Lord, it's happened again. But there was, Kate, that opportunity you had, as you mentioned, to sort of put the local sort of, not necessarily spin, but certainly that's what it is, on that story was sort of a baptism by fire for you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Like I said, my work in sports really helped me with getting stuff on deadline. And then, of course, going from that to hurricane coverage and things like that, it really kind of helps you when you're always under pressure for sports to understand translate that to different news events that happen, in the course of my career at the Sun Herald.
Kate, I've got a picture, and it's the newsroom and Stan and me, Stan Tyner at the time, the executive editor of the Sun Herald. The day, I think it was the Friday before Katrina hit on the weekend, and we brought everybody together. And we talked about if what happens if what is projected to happens, it's going to change our lives forever. Do you remember that meeting?
I do. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of it myself. And, I was actually in a walk for the Heart Association or something like that, and got a call and said, hey, we're going to have a meeting at 2 p.m. We need everybody there. Start calling people. And, the outlook was dire at that time. And, of course, it was worse than we thought. But yeah, I remember that very well.
It was a tough time, and we all knew that it might be terrible. Could we have ever imagined that it turned out the way it did? It was I often refer to it literally a life-changing event for me on just about every level. Because as you know, my family and I were nearly washed away by the storm. We couldn't get across the Pops Ferry Bridge the day after. The only communication I had was a satellite phone. But where did you ride out the storm, Kate?
Okay, this is going to sound like a joke, but it was with my insurance agent, 3 priests, and some of my family at my insurance agent's house because he had a safe room. Yeah. And I nearly stayed at my house so that I could get to the Sun Herald more quickly. And my mother begged me to come and be with them. And so I relented and went to Long Beach because she was so upset at the idea that I would be in my house by myself.
As I mentioned, I had a satellite phone, so I was in touch with Art Brisbane, who at the time was an executive vice president for Knight Ridder. He was in San Jose. And I could communicate with him, and he could communicate back with the newspaper. And Marlene Clura, who was the operations director at the time, convinced me to let a few employees stay at the newspaper. And as the water continued to rise at my house, and the apocalyptic experience that we were all having happened, I worried. There was a period of time, it was a good hour or two, where we had no communication at the Sun Herald at all, and I worried that I had made a terrible decision. And I remember when Art finally was able to get back to me to say, yes, we've heard from Marlene and the team, they're fine, and here's this is the situation. But we all sort of reemerged in the aftermath, and it was incredibly inspiring to see the team come together and do what we did after the storm. It was really incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. And when I was in Long Beach, I could reach you might remember her, Myra Humphreys.
Yes, of course.
Yes. She was Myra Humphreys' Opal at the time. She was living in DC, and I could reach her on my cell phone, but I couldn't reach anybody at the Sun Herald. She could, and I couldn't reach anybody at Knight Ridder, but she could reach Knight Ridder. So I would call her, tell her what was going on, and then she would relay it to Knight Ridder in DC so that they could update our story. And that was really amazing. My cell phone, it was a cellular cell, little blue Nokia phone. And that ended up in museum as part of our Katrina exhibit afterwards, because it was one of the few phones that was working. Who knows why that one worked and nobody else's did, but it did. So
I remember, and Haley wrote about this in his book, when I called Haley Barber, I think the Tuesday after the storm, there was only one place out in the parking lot you could stand with the sat phone and get a decent service. So I had to go out in the parking lot to talk with him about putting together this meeting that on the following Sunday that was sort of the impetus for the governor's commission. But we didn't have a lot of the fancy cellular technology that exists today. In fact, a lot of the cell towers were seriously challenged. So satellite capabilities was the way we were able to get a lot of stuff out. But it was it was literally a mismatch of technologies and all these different things, and we were able to publish the very next day and the next day. We didn't miss a day of publication, but to watch everyone who had so many challenges, some losing family members, so many losing everything. 67 employees at the Sun Herald lost everything. It was incredible to see people in the midst of so much loss want to still serve the community the way that they did, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And, there were several people in the newsroom of that 67 who lost everything. And, they just said, I just want to work. I just want to work.
Yeah.
And we tell them, take time off if you need it, do what you need to do. And they're like, I will, but right now I want to work.
The journalism that took place after that really literally defines what it means to have a reliably and accurately informed citizenry, didn't it?
It did. And I think, that was one of the reasons I think that the Sun Herald survived in its former iteration as long as it did, was because people were so appreciative of our efforts after Katrina. And for a long time, that was their only news source, because they didn't have electricity and they didn't have cable and they didn't have a lot of things that, would bring them radio or television or internet or anything else. So, we were their only means of finding out what was going on in their backyard. That and talking to neighbors.
Right. It was inspiring. We all left every day with a pile of papers to bring back to our neighborhoods and hand out along the way. And it was a very inspiring time. And it, I think, what I really felt strongly about it, and I know you did as well, that people had some tough decisions to make about whether to rebuild, what their insurance situation was going to be, what the new flood maps were going to cause, and blah, blah, blah. Just so many decisions. Our goal was to try to grab all those decisions as they were, the answers, as they were evolving, and give people the best possible information we could give them so they could make a decision to stay and to still be part of our community. And the other thing, Kate, is hope. We needed to give people, Stan and I talked about that all the time, that we needed people to know we will get through this. But hope was so important, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. And, I think it was very important to us in the newsroom and to the newspaper as a whole that we find the stories that made people feel good so that they could see that, yes, this happened, but we're able to do this and we're able to do this and people are doing this, so that they had that hope on a regular basis. We wanted to make sure that we could lift their spirits in some way, and not just with the comics page, but with stories about their neighbors. And I think that made a big difference.
When we were awarded the gold medal for public service Pulitzer, Stan said that the medal sort of dedicates it to the people of South Mississippi. It was kind of a pinnacle moment of recognition that all of our hard work had paid off.
It really was. And, I remember we were all gathered around, we're watching my screen and we saw our name, and, it was just one of the most seminal moments of my life and in my career. I mean, it really was. And I am still so profoundly proud of the work that we did. I would still be profoundly proud of the work that we did, but having it recognized within the journalism community really kind of cemented the fact that we were doing it right.
Our friend Tony Biffle died in the last couple of years, and Tony, for those who don't know Tony, he was an editorial writer for the Sun Herald, and his editorials in the wake of Hurricane Katrina were some of the most unbelievably important editorials ever written, probably in the history of the coast of Mississippi. Yeah. And one day I'm going to do a story just focused on Tony and some of his words, because what he wrote and what he wrote to reflect, so in some cases the anger, in a lot of cases the hope, a lot of cases the confusion, a lot of cases screaming to the powers that be in Jackson and Washington that we need attention on certain things. Just an amazing time for the Sun Herald, and it was an absolute pleasure. And I was honored to have the opportunity to work shoulder to shoulder with you, Kate, during that process. But hey, when we come back on the other side, I want to talk a little bit about Kate and XXV and the fact that we have 2 TV station news operations today. Just get her thoughts on all that. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. You have Kate MaGandy. She's an assistant news director at WXXV. And, one day we probably ought to come back together again, Kate, and just talk about the digital revolution and how it changed everything. It literally changed everything, and we knew it was going to change everything, but never in our wildest imagination did we ever know that it would end up where it is today. And
Yeah.
we'll do that. Any closing thoughts about hurricanes or hurricane season before we switch over to XXV?
Yeah, I think that the overriding thing that I think about is that we're not finished. We're still rebuilding back in some respects, but as I was telling you earlier, I got an email this morning that said 100 days to hurricane season, and that always makes me think, what do I have to do to prepare? We just bought a new house, so we have to make sure that we are ready for a storm in that respect. And in my new job as assistant news director, I'm back in the newsroom for storms. And what do I have to do to make sure that we are ready to cover it and to make sure that our team is safe in doing that coverage?
At the Sun Herald, we were across the street from WLOX, so we had this kind of ongoing love-hate relationship. We would be partners, and then we wouldn't be partners, and we'd be partners. But when the going got tough, we always worked together. That is definitely for sure. So it was you say friendly competition, but it was a pretty serious competition. But we stayed very much in touch with one another. Certainly after Katrina, we did everything we could to help each other. But after all those years of knowing all those people over there and having that great relationship, is it odd now to be at WXXV? When you can look back inside that organization and see people at WLOX, what's the nature of the competitive situation?
Well, I think just like when I was at the Sun Herald, we are competitors at the end of the day, and we are always going to compete to get stories. We're always going to compete to get the stories first, but accurately. And so, I still have friends that work at WLOX, and, I'm sure you're aware, Don Moore is now our general manager. He was a longtime WLOX employee. Megan Gray, who was a longtime morning anchor, is now with us on the morning shows. So, it's the nature of the business, especially if you want to stay on the coast, that people are going to change jobs and intersect from time to time. But I respect the people that are at WLOX, and I hope that they respect us. But at the end of the day, we're competitors.
Well, the Megan Gray piece was interesting, and it kind of transpired pretty quickly. But so a good catch for WXXV under the circumstances for her to now be in your morning show. I've worked with Don Moore in the community for so many years. I mean, we worked in Goodwill Industries of South Mississippi together, United Way. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's a smart guy who really knows the industry really well, and he's very competitive and very focused. And so to be interesting to see under his leadership what happens next with WXXV. But I think it's good. You know what? The reality is you can never have too much reporting in a community. It
Right.
comes back to what I said at the beginning. Reliably and accurately informed electorate. I mean, no one has a lock on news. There's more news out there than we have news reporters to go get. So the more the merrier, the way I look at it.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. There are going to be stories that we are both going to go after. There are stories that we do that they don't. There are stories that they do that we don't. And it just means that the public has more to choose from and a wider range of things to help keep them informed.
Right. No one's locked into just one source. People want multiple sources. And then when you add to that sort of the digital extension of whatever the news source is, whether it be XXV, the Sun Herald, WLOX, or even Coast Vue, for that matter, the opportunity to interact and engage with readers and viewers on social media, through the internet, through whatever podcast, whatever it might be. It's again, the more the merrier, and really people want to consume news in different ways. There's still people who are reading the printed newspaper, and we'll talk at some point even more about people say, "Oh, poor Sun Herald, I wish they would get it right," or "I wish that it's not the Sun Herald's fault." I mean, it's called the digital tsunami, and the entire business model that supported the old Sun Herald doesn't exist anymore. It's just a new model today, and it's just it's a new model for everybody. I mean, even for television, the model has changed, and the relationship with networks has changed, and how the money comes in has changed. Everything is different, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's very much changed. And, I still have some very good friends that work at the Sun Herald. Justin Mitchell, who I helped bring into the Sun Herald, is now their, I think it's an audience and growth editor, but he's in effect the city editor for them now. And he does a great job. But it's different. It's vastly different from when I started in journalism, and certainly vastly different from when I left the Sun Herald.
Yeah, when I left the Sun Herald in 2009, there were over 50 people in the newsroom. How many people in the newsroom today, Kate?
I think 5 or 6.
So there you go. It just explains to you how difficult it is to cover a market this large with that few number of people.
Yeah.
But it's just the reality of the digital situation. Kate, we're out of time, but I'll have you back. People might be would like to hear a little bit more about the digital evolution and what it meant, and maybe you and I could talk about that. And have any really cool stories that you guys are on that there's something you want to talk more about, just let me know, and we'll have a show around it. But it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend.
Thank you. You too, Ricky.
Have a great day. This has been Kate MaGandy Holzhauser, and she's the assistant news editor at WXXV. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.